Our guest today is Lydia Mulyk, who's Vice President of Kingsdale Advisors. She's going to talk about the mechanics of merger votes, the vote proposals. This is all part of the Doing Deals Hot Takes Conference. I'm Brock Romanek, today on Zippy Point. So Lydia, thanks for doing this, our Doing Deals conference. And so the first question I have for you when it comes to merger vote proposals is, what is the difference between majority and then majority of outstanding vote, what those requirements?
Sure, thanks for that question. So what we're going to be discussing today is not a tender offer as a way to get a deal closed, but more on the vote side of what is needed in order for the votes to pass. In a typical merger situation, you have a one proposal that is the deal proposal, where you're asking, what is the amount of shares that is needed in order for that deal to close? Usually that's the majority of the vote. Voting in favor of that proposal will get that proposal passed. However, where we've seen a lot of issues in deals closing is that there are other proposals that are contingent to the deal closing that need to pass, that have different vote thresholds in order for those proposals to pass. So you might have the majority of shares outstanding as a threshold for passing certain proposals, which may be difficult depending on what your shareholder base looks like. So if you have the majority of the shares outstanding, that means all of your shares that exist, half of those need to vote in favor of those particular proposals for them to pass, versus majority of votes cast, which is just 50% of those that show up and vote need to vote in favor in order for the votes to pass. So because you don't just have the one proposal for the merger on most of these merger votes, you have other proposals that may be more difficult to pass because they have a more difficult vote threshold than just that one merger proposal. And where we've seen that there are issues with this proposal being passed is dependent on what your shareholder base looks like. So if you have a largely institutional shareholder base, most of those votes are going to come in. So you don't have to worry about getting the requisite number of votes in order for the deal to close. In a situation where you have a very large retail participation or retail composition, you might have more difficulty in getting proposals passed simply because shareholders are not voting. And this, I don't remember if this was a question that we're going to discuss later, but there's a difference also in whether or not these proposals that have these different vote requirements are a routine or not routine proposal. So if you're doing a deal, for example, that has a reverse stock split, a reverse stock split might receive a routine vote where brokers can vote on behalf of their clients and a large retail broker, and those votes will be cast automatically in favor. And then you might have a separate proposal that does not get that routine vote, that routine broker vote, which might be more difficult. So, for example, Robinhood. Robinhood has been all over the news recently, and a lot of shareholders, retail shareholders, are now using Robinhood because they don't charge fees for trading. And if you have a shareholder breakdown where a lot of your retail shareholders hold at Robinhood, there might not be as much voting participation as, say, a TD Ameritrade or a Charles Schwab that historically, well, Charles Schwab no longer issues a routine broker vote, but a TD Ameritrade or E-Trade would. So if you have a large amount of shareholders at Robinhood and you have a routine proposal for your merger vote, then you're not going to get that vote passed as easily if 25% of your shares hold at Robinhood, where the shareholders actually have to go in and actively vote. So there's many different facets to how difficult your vote's going to be, depending on whether or not the proposal's routine or not routine, what your vote requirements are for that proposal, and then also what the composition of your shareholder base looks like, depending on institution, retail, and then within retail, where your different retail shareholders hold their shares, be it a broker that issues a vote on behalf of their clients or does not.
That's the broker votes and non-broker votes.
Correct. And for most proposals for a merger vote would not receive a routine broker vote, other than if you're doing a reverse stock split that's contingent to your deal, that will, depending on how it's worded in the proxy statement, it could receive the routine broker vote.
And what can be done to mitigate low turnout on a merger proposal?
Sure. So if you have a large retail composition or a large retail component of your shareholder base, there's a couple of ways that you can reach out to their shareholders. Part of the reason that solicitors exist is because we can reach out to the shareholders directly and vote them by phone and transmit that vote directly. So what happens is people receive these documents in the mail, they throw them out, which is why solicitors are employed to call people and get their votes over the phone. So the first is that you can do a retail calling campaign. Another very effective method of communication is doing reminder emails. So there's a mechanism in place that allows you to just send through Broadridge and through Mediant, and usually through whoever your transfer agent is, to your registered holders. Send a reminder telling people this vote is coming up on this and this date. We noticed that you haven't voted yet. Please click this link and vote your shares. We found that that's a very effective way of getting participation, because the more people see that reminder and they still haven't taken action, the more likely they are to think that it's an important vote. There's also reminder mailings that can be done. So you can send another full set of materials, or you can send just a box slip that reminds people to vote. That can also be effective if you have enough time left to bring in the vote via the mailing. And then the other two ways are, if you do have an institutional component to your shareholder base, then we could just do institutional calls, just making sure that people have the votable position that they have filed for. And then if you have any insiders or any shareholders that are have voting agreements, we just make sure that we monitor that all of those votes are in. You'd be surprised at how many insiders or directors or people that are part of the company believe that they voted, but monitoring their vote, we only find that they voted a small portion of their shares. So they have registered shares, they received the registered card, they sent it back, but their largest position is at a broker, and we note that that position is not voted. So kind of monitoring where you expect the vote to come in through and making sure those votes come in.
I'm just curious on the reminder email, since I do a bit of that in the job I have in trying to get people to open up their emails. Do you get involved, a solicitor, in crafting the language for the subject line of the email, for the body of the email?
So it depends on how a company decides to do it. So if you do the reminder emails directly through Broadridge or through Mediant, it's a standardized format that is sent that gives them a link to click through, and they just vote it on their own. You can do a tailored messaging campaign. However, as the company, if anything is outside of what's included in your proxy statement or any separate communications, you do have to file that with the SEC. So most companies just choose to do the route of, what's automatically can be sent out quickly versus going through the whole, let's craft something specific and then send that out.
Yeah, but sometimes one of my hobbies is going through the additional soliciting material that's filed with the SEC. Sometimes there's some pretty interesting stuff for a securities nerd.
Yeah, it's true.
But there are scripts, there are all kinds of things that are filed.
There are, and it depends on what the communication's like. So if we are able to find an email, if we speak to a shareholder and the shareholder asks us, can you send us an additional information, we can send that through with more specific, a more tailored response to that shareholder, not necessarily soliciting their vote via the email, but you can have more direct lines of communication that way versus what Broadridge would send as a mass email.
Great stuff, Lydia. Thanks so much. And doing deals. Thanks for your time.
You're welcome.